The Xbox Series X is a pretty advanced piece of hardware. It can do a lot, and because it has to work with a wide range of display and audio devices, it's got a wide range of settings. But what do all of them mean, and what do they actually do? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and today we're going to explore Xbox Series X settings, why they're there, what they do, what you should and shouldn't do, and how a lot of it depends on what your TV can and can't do. Sounds like a lot, and it is, but I'm going to break this down as simply as I can without getting mired in the weeds so you can just have the best experience you can in the shortest amount of time possible with your Xbox Series X, or the one you're going to get any day now, right? Before we get going, how many of you have an Xbox Series X and how many of you are still waiting? I'm still waiting to get my own myself. Leave me a comment about that down below, and while you're at it, please like and subscribe so I know if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks so much. Now, let's go. First, let's start with the TV. Now, this part can be a little tricky because every TV manufacturer is a little different, and it also depends on what year your TV is. Today, a lot of this stuff is automated, but in older TVs, you might need to turn on like UHD color for the HDMI input you're going to use so that HDR is actually enabled. And you might need to select the game picture preset for your TV, which it won't switch to automatically. And in some cases, you might have to turn on a game mode, which lowers input lag by shutting off a bunch of processing. And it may be actually separate from a picture preset. Some 2019 Samsung TVs were like that. My hope is that if your TV is 2 years old or maybe a little older, you can go rooting around to find the stuff and make sure it's all set up correctly. Even on more modern TVs, you might have to pay attention to your HDMI ports. If there is one labeled 4K at 120 Hz, you'll want to use that one. And it may be that you have to turn variable refresh rate on or otherwise enable it within the TV. Some newer TVs are supposed to make the right adjustments automatically, but that doesn't always work, so the takeaway here is to always double check. Now let's turn our attention to the Xbox Series X. It's been my experience so far that when the console detects a new TV that supports HDR, it almost immediately prompts you to do an HDR calibration. This is what that looks like. Now you can go forward with this if you want to, but keep in mind that if you use the Series X TV calibration system that I'm about to show you, you'll probably want to come back and do this HDR specific bit again. So this is the Xbox Series X's TV calibration guide, and it does offer a step-by-step process of making adjustments to some basic brightness, contrast, and color adjustments. A lot of TVs come with very good out-of-box picture settings, but if you have the time, it doesn't hurt to make sure your settings are as good as they can be. Now, when you get to this section, it's going to ask you to turn on the TV's RGB mode or blue only mode, or maybe you grab like a blue filter, looks like 3D glasses with blue film in them. Your TV may or may not have one of those features, so you may have to skip this part, which fortunately you can do without just quitting the whole thing. Then after that's done, we can go into HDR calibration here and perform these steps. That's if you have an HDR TV. If you don't, then just skip this altogether. So this is going to help get the Xbox an understanding of your TV's HDR capabilities, so it puts out the correct information to your TV. Essentially, you adjust things darker or brighter until you just barely see the checkerboard pattern here. On this next one, you want to adjust brightness up just until you can't see the checkerboard pattern at all, and then again the same on this last one. Once that is saved, you should be done, and this graphic is supposed to show you the difference, but I have yet to see a significant difference here, likely because TVs tend to do their own tone mapping and are going to handle the image based on what it thinks it should do with the HDR metadata. By the way, I've heard rumors about a bug where the settings get saved, but then the Xbox alters the values and you have to redo them after restarting the console. I have not been able to duplicate this, so I'm not positive it's a widespread issue. Now let's see what the Xbox says this TV can do. Click Settings, General, which is at the top here, and then TV and Display Options. Then we go into 4K TV Details, and here's what we've got. All the boxes are ticked green here, but what if they aren't? Two things could be true if you don't get all the green check marks. One is fairly simple. Your TV doesn't support, say, 120 Hz or variable refresh rate or Dolby Vision. Maybe it does 4K at 60 Hz and HDR, but that's all. Then you would expect to see just those elements ticked green. However, if your TV does support Dolby Vision and 120 Hz and variable refresh rate, and you aren't getting some or all of them, then there could be a few explanations. One is that the console is not handshaking with your TV correctly. If that's the case, turn the TV off, turn the console off, unplug the console, plug it back in, turn the TV on, then turn the console on and see if that did the trick. Basically, you're powering everything down, unplugging it, and then bringing it back together. If that doesn't work, then go into your TV's menu and force it to check for an update. I've seen instances where I have auto update turned on, but when I forced an update, What do you know? There's one available. If that doesn't work, then you might have a faulty or insufficient cable. Now, if you're using the cable that came with the Series X, you should be fine, but if you got another one, it may not actually support the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second, and that would definitely restrict functionality, as we'll talk about later. Backing one step out of that menu under display here, we can see our resolution is 4K UHD and our refresh rate is 120 Hertz. If 120 Hertz isn't selectable or just isn't there and it's fixed at 60 Hertz, that's probably because your TV doesn't have a 120 Hertz native panel. If you are absolutely convinced though that it is a native 120 Hertz panel, then you probably have a communication problem and need to perform the steps I detailed just a moment ago. One very important note here, if you have a 120 Hertz panel, but for some reason you select 60 Hertz here, that means the Xbox is going to cap the bandwidth down at 18 gigabits per second, and that could mean lost features elsewhere. So keep this at 120 Hertz if you can. That's the only way to get the most out of the Series X. Now let's go into this video mode section. What does this stuff mean? Allow 50 Hertz means it will play 50 Hertz content from video apps. We don't get a lot of that here in the US, but it doesn't hurt to leave it on. Allow 24 Hertz is for playing movies at their native frame rate, and that's especially important for DVD, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray playback. Auto low latency mode, leave this on, because if your TV supports it, it should go straight into game mode for the least amount of lag. Doesn't work on some TVs though, so keep that in mind. Allow variable refresh rate. I say leave this on. It's going to be a bigger and bigger help as more games support it. The only reason I'd turn it off is if you're running into some problems and want to shut it off to troubleshoot. Allow 4K and allow HDR10, pretty self-explanatory. Now, auto HDR, what does that do? Well, for the most part, it allows the Xbox to present non-HDR games as if they were in HDR, and I'm hearing that it works really well. If you're old school though and just want to play the game exactly as it was developed to look in SDR, by all means, feel free to turn this off, but I wouldn't. Allow Dolby Vision. This is for games and movies, and if you have a Dolby Vision TV, absolutely leave this on if you can. Again though, if you run into problems and you ever think Dolby Vision being on could be the culprit, you can always turn this off in a sequence to check. I left this unchecked one for last, and that's because it needs the most explanation, but I'm going to try and keep it intentionally simple. This refers to Chroma Subsampling, which has to do with how much color information can be sent to the TV. There are 3 levels, low to high, and that's 420, 422, and 444. Now, that color information takes up a fair amount of bandwidth, and there are times when your Xbox senses it's being asked to send more than the 40 gigabits per second it is capable of sending down the pipeline. If it does that, instead of sending the highest amount of color information, that's 444, it will go all the way down to the lowest amount of color info, that's 420. This setting lets you find a middle ground. It will allow the Series X to send 422 color down the pipe, and that means that you're going to get less banding in broad color areas. Now, a lot of TVs are pretty good at cleaning up that banding using their own processing, but remember, you are in game mode where a lot of that kind of processing is disabled so that you have less lag. So if you watch a lot of 60 FPS high color content, and I'm thinking certain UHD Blu-rays may fit this bill, then you can tick this and it might provide better color. Right now though, I don't think this is going to benefit many people at all, so it's also fine to just leave it unchecked. Now we're going to jump into video fidelity and overscan. Under display, leave this on auto detect. It knows what kind of connection you have, right? Color depth. Now here's a spot where you think more is better, right? Not necessarily. This has a bit to do with that Chroma Subsampling stuff I talked about before. First off, no need to ever select 12-bit because in most cases that would push the Xbox past its 40 gigabits per second boundary, so it's pointless to click this. You can click 10-bit if you want, but it's not like the Xbox is able to add any bits per pixel that aren't already there. So if it isn't getting an HDR signal, then it isn't really going to be 10-bit territory. If you leave it at 8-bit, it will automatically jump to 10-bit when you go into HDR mode, and that's what matters. So pick 8 or 10, whatever you like, because it isn't going to matter much anyway. Color space. And this is something else I got wrong in a previous video because it's confusing, right? You want to keep this at standard because, put very simply, this is a TV, not a PC monitor, and it's expecting a range of code values to operate with. Setting this to standard has the Xbox sending that correct range of values. If you connect a PC monitor though, you are okay switching this down to PC. Last thing on this screen is device control. I don't know why this is off by default, but I like a lot of these features. The same tech that lets your TV's volume control button control your soundbar or receiver volume or turn those devices on and off it's right here. So for me, I'm going to turn on CEC, then I'm going to let the console turn on my TV or receiver if I had one involved here, and then I will allow the console to turn off the TV and receiver or soundbar or whatever. I don't want turning the TV off to also turn off the console in case I want a game to update, but don't want to leave the TV on. And I don't personally see much value in letting the Xbox control volume, so I'm leaving that off myself, but hey, you do you. And that's it for video settings. We'll put out another video for audio settings, but for now, I hope this has helped you get the very best picture quality from your Xbox Series X. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Big shout out to Vincent Teo over at HD TV Test. He has a video doing a much deeper dive on some of what I talked about today, and he's full of great info, so go check him out when you have some time. But right now, please like, subscribe, and here's 2 other videos I think you'll like.